I think it's hard to underestimate the value of creating a sense of being everywhere and a sense of momentum for your brand. I think right now people are afraid to buy. And so you can't just give them a really good pitch. You have to make them think that there's like very little downside to doing it. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to make it seem like everybody's doing it. And so they might as well do it too. That like, well, I describe it as like, you have to balance like the fear of making the wrong choice with the fear of missing out, right? And so like people have to be way more afraid they're going to miss out than afraid they're going to make the wrong choice. And that's why they're going to buy. And so I think one of the best ways to do that is to create this sense of omnipresence, of kind of like being everywhere.
All right, we are live, and looks like we already have people joining in, which is always fun to see.
Awesome.
Given the topic about PLG and running demand gen for PLG, I'm sure everybody is interested, right? That's always good to see.
Yes, no, it is. I think it's a topic that a lot of people are focused on right now, you know, with all of the changes going on in the industry. So a lot of folks are trying to figure out the best ways to do it.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So before we get started, I'll get some logistics out of the way. So folks joining in, drop in the chat where you're from. We want to keep this super conversational and engaging. I know everybody says that, but we really do mean it. If you have any questions, just shoot them in the Q&A tab so that we can pop it up on the stage and we can get them answered from Meg. I think with that said, I think we can probably get started. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm Vikash. I lead the marketing team over here at Revenue Hero, and Masters of Revenue is our virtual summit where we bring in leaders and practitioners who've driven pipeline and revenue for their organizations and have them share their strategies and tactics that they are seeing working today, so that we can all walk away with playbooks that we can all implement in our organization, right? On those lines, I have Meg Gowell. She was at Appcues, Director of Growth Marketing, till a couple of days back. I'll let her introduce herself and talk a little bit. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey at Appcues, and we can get into it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. So yeah, as you said, my name's Meg Gowell. I've been in marketing for about 10 years. I started in a lot of really small agencies, working more on the performance marketing side of things. But I think it was a really great opportunity for me to experience like a lot of different brands and really see how a lot of different folks were kind of approaching marketing. More recently, I was at Appcues for about 2 years as their director of growth marketing. And that's where I really dove much further into all things PLG and just much more understanding how folks were approaching PLG. Not only is it something that, Appcues is really, finds really important as part of our go-to-market motion, but it's also something that we help our customers with. And so I think I've seen a lot of different versions of it as a result, a lot of different ways that people are approaching PLG, kind of introducing a PLG motion into their go-to-market organization and stuff like that. So had kind of a wide range of experience from, both seeing it firsthand myself doing it, and then also seeing how other folks are approaching it with, Appcues as a tool. So.
Got it. So given that you've had a lot of experience, running marketing at agencies, I'm sure you've worked with a bunch of clients, and so like how do you see demand gen sort of like change? How do you see it being different from at other organizations that are probably more sales led versus how is it at a company that's more PLG focused?
Yeah. So a lot of my background early on in agencies was very heavily in kind of like a lead generation model. So I used to joke that most of what I did was just get people to fill out forms, right? So like my only goal was to get you to fill out the form. And once that was done, I was good, right? Like that was the extent of my job. Once you filled out the form, the lead went to someone else, and then it was their job to figure out the rest, but I didn't really care. And so I got really, really, really good at getting people to fill out forms. Like that was what I was great at. And, I worked some with the sales team, but really that was where the drop off was, is there was just this really clear drop off between where marketing ended and where sales started. And there was not as much of that kind of, smooth handoff. There wasn't ongoing nurturing after as much. Like, you might run a few nurture campaigns, you might have an email nurture here and there, but my focus was always on that, like, just give the lead to sales and then move on to the next one, right? And then I think at Appcues, it's really been different because we are so much more PLG focused. So it's much more about, like, understanding where the prospect is in their journey, and then, really using the product to sell. And so sales is more assisting the sale more than anything else. It's not just I find someone to raise their hand and then give them to sales and then that's the end. Instead, it's much more, I'm going to bring someone in, get them excited in the product. And then, when they're raising their hand to ask for help from somebody, like, that's when we bring in the human interaction. So I think it just kind of changes your mindset a little bit about, how the two teams work together, and how you kind of move a prospect kind of along the buyer journey, so to speak.
Got it. Given that, right, like, I'm sure if sales is being more of an assisting in this entire journey, right, in this entire process, I'm sure that we need some sort of a process or tooling in place to sort of help them understand that, okay, hey, this set of account or this set of people are probably ready to buy. Maybe we should reach out to them. Do you have something like that in place, or is it more of like, okay, hey, we'll wait till people raise their hand, we'll wait till people explicitly tell us that they are interested to talk to someone? How does it work at Appcues, and what have you seen also work better generally?
Yeah. So I think, as marketers, we're always trying to know exactly what someone needs next, right? Like, that's what you always hear of, like, okay, give them the perfect piece of content, give them the perfect action to do, right? And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to know, like, mysteriously know what our prospect is thinking about, like, in every single moment, and know, like, if they're ready. And I think it kind of holds us back in some ways because it makes us so focused on the right thing that we don't think about making sure to give people options so, like, they can self-select in some ways, and understand that the journey probably isn't that linear. So what I've seen kind of is the most effective is more of like a multi-pronged approach. Like, you're going to have some people who come through the door who have already evaluated your tool, maybe because, someone in their org used to use it at another organization. Like, you just have no idea when someone signs up for a trial if they're experiencing it for the first time, or if they're like bought in and like, I need to buy, I have a product launch next week, and like, I just need to get going. You really just don't know. It can be really hard to figure that out. So what we found at Appcues was we changed our trial a little bit to kind of ask that question of, where are you? Like, what is your goal today? Not, what's your long-term goals with Appcues? What's your use case? Instead, what's your goal today? What do you want to do right now? Like, do you want to build something? Are you a developer and you're like ready to just install it and just get going and you're done? Or do you just kind of want to look around? Because sometimes people, that's all they want to do, right? They just want to get a sense of the tool. And so we started to find that we really needed to give folks like a number of different options. And one of those is, as you said, having a very easy way for someone to raise their hand and say, I want to talk to sales. And that's great. If they know that, just make it easy for them to find it. And I think the other one is letting them get into your product, start experiencing it, and then start tracking that behavior, as you said. So start being able to identify, what kinds of behaviors is this person doing? Are they inviting new users to the account? Are they building something? Which features are they interacting with? How are they interacting with them? And then starting to capture all of that kind of behavioral data and send it back so it can be kind of actioned on by both your sales and marketing team. So at Appcues, we do it in a few different ways. A lot of it kind of comes through our own tool, things we're capturing in our own tool, and then sending that back into our CRM, HubSpot, and Salesforce. And then from there, kind of like, if it's the right moment, alerting a sales person, right? So if it's the right moment, maybe we're setting a Slack ping to be like, hey, at this moment, this person just published something. This is a really good time to reach out to them and say, hey, I saw you publish this experience. Like, let's talk about it. Or what was your goal? And then some of the behavior we're just capturing in the CRM. So when they do go to do outreach or something like that, they kind of have all the context of what happened. So I think that there are like a few different, I guess there are 3 different steps of it. One, making it really easy for people to contact you if they want to. I think that's sometimes overlooked, actually. Like, I've had times when I've looked at a product and been like, okay, but if I wanted to buy this right now, like, how would I actually go about that? So like, making sure that that's easy. And then I think the second one is making sure you're capturing all of that behavioral data that you can. The more you can capture it and make it easy to find so that it is actionable for your sales and marketing team is huge, because you don't know in the moment necessarily what behavior you're going to want to use. And then the third one is really identifying those most important kind of key behavioral signals and finding a way to kind of send them in real time. Again, Slack is something we use, but other, you could use email or something else, but send them kind of like in real time to your team so you can act on things and be very behaviorally based. I think that that's where true personalization comes in, right? It's not just having like F name. It's more about understanding what someone did, and as a result, maybe like what they're thinking and where they're going next. So
Awesome. Yeah. I think just thinking about the ops side of things, I'm sort of my mind is sort of like blown, because like you have data flowing into to Appcues directly, you have data flowing into a HubSpot, and you have data flowing into, I'm assuming, also to Salesforce, so that your Salesforce can do their outreach, and the marketing team can probably run some campaigns based out of the actions people are taking inside the product. So apart from this, like, are there any specific tooling that you're sort of like using on top of this to ensure you are able to action on some of these product usages and things like that?
so I guess like what they do kind of after they get the behavioral trigger, is that what you're thinking? Yeah.
Yeah.
So our own tool Appcues does help with that, right? You can set up experiences to trigger kind of like the moment something happens. So the moment you complete something, something can trigger. And we've used that. We definitely use that some. Otherwise, more of what we're doing is kind of like the email outreach, or LinkedIn outreach or something like that. And so it's kind of like a combination between those like in-app experiences that are maybe set up ahead of time by marketing or ops, with the more like personal touch from sales that's more likely to come from a different channel. But again, we're always experimenting with new channels too, and kind of understanding like when the best moment to get in touch with somebody is. And also I think it's important to think about, like who do they expect to be in touch with them at a certain time. So sometimes like you want a certain message, right, to look like it's coming from marketing or look like it's coming from sales, right? We've run into that sometimes where we'll have something we want to say and there'll be this whole debate internally of like, well, who should this really come from? Like, who do they expect? Like, should this be like a product email or a sales email, or like what team does the prospect expect to get this from? And who does it sound most like, natural and engaging from too?
Totally. This just reminded me of this pretty viral hack that I think was pretty popular probably 3-4 years back, where somebody from the sales team would reach out saying that, hey, my CEO asked me to reach out to you. We should get on a call, that sort of stuff, right? So I think that totally makes sense in terms of like just trying to get into for the lack of better phrase, get into prospect's mind and understand who are they expecting to hear from at this particular point, and then sort of take decisions based off of that, right?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, and who will they take the message from best too, right? We have some of our free trial sequence come from different people on the team. So like some will come from the director of sales, and some might come, like when you talk about installing though, that comes from our ops guy, right? Because you're way more likely to be like, oh, the ops guy gets it. You know what I mean? Like he gets what installing is all about. Whereas like if that came from me, you'd be like, what does this girl know what she's saying, right? Like she can barely, set up her own computer settings. Why is she telling me how to install something? So I think, yeah, matching the message to the person is something that can be a really great way to add personalization to what you're doing too.
Nice. I think because you talked a little bit about the different channels that you're probably experimenting and things like that. I want to talk a little bit about go a little bit higher up in the funnel, right, and talk about like what are some of the strategies or channels that are working well for you, especially from a PLG perspective, right? Because when you think about it, right, like on the sales led side, you have your typical problem aware, solution aware, and then the product aware, right? Does that change a little bit on the PLG motion, where you have your typical buyer awareness till probably they sign up, and is there a different funnel after they sign up Is it something like that over there?
It's interesting. So I am very like on the fence about funnel these days, quite honestly. Like I think that those phases are true across all motions to some extent, right? People are in different stages. Where I think folks go wrong sometimes is expecting that they can identify what stage someone is in and that there's like a really specific message for each one. Because I don't think you always know. And I also think that there are times, as all the privacy changes, all the changes to Google, all the tracking changes, like it's getting really hard to know, has this person visited my website before? Like, how many of my ads have they actually seen? Like, it's getting very hard to know those things. And ideally, a lot of your content and the ads that you're showing should help people at any stage, right? Like, there's probably top of funnel content that would still be valuable to somebody even if they were about to purchase your product, right? There's webinars that are really helpful to someone who's in a actual sales cycle already. So I think it's important first off to realize that like things can kind of change throughout the funnel. I think the way that we've approached it at Appcues with advertising has been really grouping content types, but not being super strict on targeting. And so like, I'm not going to force people to only see one kind of our ads and like expect them to follow everything linearly. But to your point about changing things with product led, I think we do more kind of nurture after they've entered the product that maybe you would see in a more sales led situation, right? And as I was talking about at the beginning, I used to be very like, here are your lead sales, like go figure it out. And now it's much more like, okay, so we know there's like an awareness stage. We know there's the beginning where we really just want to get the message out and we want people to understand, the value of using their product to sell their product and the different ways that they could do it. And so there's a ton of content assets, I think, at that level. And then once someone signs up for the trial, I think it's a combination both of continuing to impress upon both the user who signed up, but then the organization as a whole, right? That's part of it is once you have somebody sign up, you have to kind of do this more account-based marketing strategy of gaining kind of internal buy-in and internal momentum to get the deal through. And so we do a lot of nurture both to individual trialers, but then also kind of key personas in their organization once someone signs up, because we're never sure like who's going to need to sign off. Like, does the CFO need to sign off in this case? Is the CEO going to sign off in this case? Like, who do we need to get on board here? And when they're on board, they might not just want to know, hey, how do I do like this really specific workflow with Appcues? They might also need to be bought into like the value of having a tool like that at all, right? And so we still kind of have to send all those messages at all the different points. I think just as you go, you kind of move from targeting an individual maybe to more specifically targeting a key group of individuals in a company. So I think that kind of can be interesting as you go through it. And then just thinking about, after you have a trial sign up, it's not about just the one person who right? It's still about the whole company. So
amazing. Given this, right? Like, I'm just curious. I'm probably getting into the rabbit hole right now. Like, I'm just curious, like, how all of this happens, because is it all mostly with the help of the sales team doing their outreach, reaching out to specific personas and saying that, hey, somebody from your team is trialing Appcues, here's why you should also have a look at it. Is it more along those lines, or do you also have like specific say ad campaigns running for those other personas and saying that, hey, here's why your company should consider using a tool like Appcues, that sort of stuff? Or is it probably a combination of both?
Yeah, so it's really a combination of both, as you said. And on the sales side, they do what they need to try to get account penetration and try to kind of like multi-thread a deal as well as they can. And that for them, right, is identifying additional personas and adding them to sequences. On the marketing side, what we've done over the past year and a half or so is really expand our use of LinkedIn. And so a lot of that comes down to better identifying accounts we have in our CRM and then finding ways to nurture them kind of depending on their status. So, Appcues has been around for like a long time, since about 2013. So there's a ton, like we've got a ton of accounts in our CRM, right? We are not lacking for like companies to potentially go after who've looked at us at one point or another. And so one of the things we've done is start creating more lists using Salesforce and HubSpot and then sending it to LinkedIn, creating more lists that identify specific accounts that are maybe in an open sales cycle or where someone is trialing from that organization, and then layering over title targeting or department targeting in LinkedIn to kind of create these sort of like nurture campaign ad campaigns to kind of run on top of the stuff that sales and marketing is doing via email. And then more recently, we created a way to pull in what accounts reps currently had in sequence. So this was more for less people who were currently in pipeline and more accounts, like target accounts we were going after. And so we kind of have a list of here are all of the accounts a rep is going after. Let's put it into a LinkedIn ad audience. Let's layer some, title targeting over it and everything like that. And then we've more recently been serving them ads that were thought leader ads written from the perspective of the AE that's reaching out to them. So the idea there is to just kind of like increase your face and name. This is obviously super tactical, maybe getting a little too in the weeds, but the idea is just like, how can you increase your face and name recognition so when they see the email, they're way more likely to open it, right? Like you want to humanize, I would say you want to humanize sales, right? Like nobody really wants to talk to a sales rep, but you have to make people want to. And I think one of the best ways to do that is like really show what like interesting, cool people they are. And so for all of our AEs thought leader posts, it kind of talks about a personal story or a personal interest of theirs and kind of connects it to Appcues. And some of it's kind of cheesy, to be completely honest. But it's also kind of fun and like tongue in cheek. And just like, one of them is about a guy who's a new dad and how, having a baby is a lot like, trying to train a user to go the right direction. One's about our AE who used to like play very competitive tennis and how like you really need to play against you need to like kind of know your opponent and play against a really quality opponent to like do well yourself. So there's a lot of just like kind of cool stories that I think are like humanizing AEs. And as a result, we're hoping it kind of nurtures the accounts they're going after. So we've been doing a lot more, I guess, ad campaigns that were like that tried to really marry what sales was doing with what marketing was doing, and nurture kind of the same accounts at the same time, and find ways to get our message across in different channels.
Got it. I think you touched upon this a little bit, but I would love to talk, double click on this a little bit more. So given that, Appcues has been around for a while, like you said, you have like tons and tons of data, right? If as you after you get to a point and when you start thinking about scaling, right, surely there's a point where performance marketing specifically starts plateauing, right? Like how do you think about scaling your pipeline from that point onwards?
Yeah. So I think that this is even more true given like what we've seen over the past year and a half or so. Um, Performance marketing is becoming increasingly saturated, more competitive, more expensive, less effective, like, all of the terrible things, which lead all of us to question ever going into this as our career in the first place. But what I found is you reach a point of saturation in most kind of performance, paid channels, and then you have to kind of expand from there. So what we've been doing more recently is, Google ads was pretty much one of our big drivers for a really long time. And Google organic was too. It was like one of our most reliable channels. We could always count on it. It was bringing the lion's share of inbound volume. And then with all the changes to Google, like, we still have leads from that channel, but it's less predictable. Like we can't count on it as much. And we're like, okay, we know we have to diversify. And so I think that that's the first step is once you reach saturation in one channel or once you start to see changes, like you have to diversify and find new channels. So the first for us was really focusing on LinkedIn and also thinking more about, brand in addition to performance marketing. For a long time, most of what we did was very focused, and most of my background too, as I said, I was a lead gen person, was very focused on this, like, I pay money for an ad, somebody signs up, it's a good ad, right? Otherwise it's a bad ad. And so there's really been, I think, this shift in the past year and a half where there's so much value. There's always been value in brands, but it's kind of coming back around. And so I think it's hard to underestimate the value of creating a sense of being everywhere and a sense of momentum for your brand. I think right now people are afraid to buy. And so you can't just give them a really good pitch you have to make them think that there's like very little downside to doing it. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to make it seem like everybody's doing it, and so they might as well do it too. That like, well, I describe it as like you have to balance like the fear of making the wrong choice with the fear of missing out, right? And so like people have to be way more afraid they're going to miss out than afraid they're going to make the wrong choice, and that's why they're going to buy. And so I think one of the best ways to do that is to create this sense of omnipresence, of kind of like being everywhere and being always on. And so that's finding a lot of different channels, understanding, where your audience is, and figuring out how you can have a lot more ground cover across a lot more places, so that even if they aren't clicking on every ad, they're seeing you a lot of places, which means when they finally do show up, or when there finally is a need for your solution, you're already in the top 3. I don't remember who did a survey recently that it's like, like only like 3 brands are ever in consideration these days for when someone needs like a new tool, and that generally like the top 3 are all ones that they'd heard of before. Like there's so much less research going into things, and it's so much more like, have I heard of you? Great. Sounds like a plan, right? And so I think there's so much value to being heard of and being known. And so one of the ways that we've done that is just experiment a lot with new channels that give us that sense of being everywhere and that sense of appearing everywhere. I think a really good example of that is LinkedIn, especially like LinkedIn sidebar ads, those little ones on the side that like you look at and you never click on, right? You can spend almost no money and show up all the time there, right? And like that's just an easy thing. Like, are you going to get direct conversions from it? Maybe not. But like if you're getting tons of impressions and they're pretty cheap, like that's great. So I think that's one thing to realize is like, yeah, when your performance marketing starts to decline or kind of plateau, finding new channels or finding ways to invest better in brand is really important, because I think that's when you start really having to rely more on brand, on word of mouth, on referrals. And so the best ways to do that are really to, support your customers, be everywhere, and get people kind of like talking about you and creating that kind of momentum. So
I can definitely say that I've been seeing Appcues all over my LinkedIn feed. I'm also seeing
yes.
if I saw a lot of Appcues ads on Reddit. Can you talk a little bit about Reddit ads, because that's one thing that I'm definitely curious about over here at Revenue Hero. I'm like, we're on the fence. Should we spend some should we experiment over there or not, and all that stuff. So like how did you folks think about Reddit ads at Appcues?
Yeah, so Reddit is a pretty new test that Appcues started running more recently. And basically what happened was, as I said, organic search had been a huge driver for us for a really long time. Still is a big driver of inbound for us, but there's just so much less consistency in organic. And we started to realize that Reddit was like taking spots for like keywords that we had done really well with, right? So it's like all of a sudden, like we'd been ranking great for like, user onboarding platform or whatever. And now like Reddit's climbing through the ranks and we're dropping to them. And so, one way we approached that was working with some of the influencers that we have like ongoing ongoing contracts with, to have them kind of, support us in the comments in one way or another, but also try to give like a helpful, response. And then we decided the other way we were going to do it is, if they're not going to click on our organic search listing, and instead they're going to click on Reddit's, then we've got to show up on Reddit, right? Like if people are going to be there instead, we've got to be there too. So more recently we started investing in Reddit, and I don't know if I can say like confidently or not yet. It's a thing that everybody has to try. Like I'm not confident enough on it yet. I'm not totally sold. The way that we approached it was much more from a content lens. So a lot of our marketing more recently has been about, if someone's not going to find our content on organic search, and Appcues has like an incredible body of content, it's been like a commitment from the beginning. If they're not going to find it via organic search, we need to get our best performing content in front of like the right audience on another channel. Like we have to find that other channel. So one of those is LinkedIn. And now we're trying to do the same thing on Reddit, right? So like we took 2 of our top performing blog posts and basically just rewrote them as Reddit threads and then promoted them. When we took like a really top performing blog post and changed it into like their carousel format. And so for us, it's really been about like, it's the content we want people to engage with, right? Like we're not just trying to get them to convert immediately or just trying to serve ads. We know that some of our content has performed very well for us in the past. And with us getting fewer views via organic, we know people need to see that content a different way to kind of keep us in the same place we've been. So Reddit was kind of our first test of that. Overall, we've seen really good click-through rates on our content assets, like pretty well above Reddit kind of baseline that they give. And so that's like encouraging. We aren't optimizing anything for conversions. I'm a little hesitant to do that because I have been a little worried about Reddit spam, which I've like heard a little bit about. So for us, it is totally about like we just want our content to be there, less than like we're trying to generate direct conversions and be able to tie it back. I think in the long run, the way we would measure success was looking at, we've run Reddit maybe. I think we started running it in June, so it's still very new. But I think after a few months, you'd have to look at kind of like a long-term lift, maybe from the channel, and then kind of use more self-attribution to see if people are talking about seeing you on the platform or something like that. I don't think you can necessarily connect the dots directly in platform on like direct conversions to a specific ad or something like that.
Got it. If anybody from the Appcues team sees this, I've seen your ad. In case I convert in the future, you know how I converted. So.
Perfect. Thank you. I feel like I need to start like generating testimonials. I feel like now it's so hard to track conversions at all. I think I need to start just generating testimonials from people to like prove ROI, to be like, okay, look, I've got 10 testimonials. That should count as like at least 100 people, right? Like 1 in every 10 are willing to talk to me. So I think that's the math everyone's going to have to start doing in the future.
Awesome. So I think the other thing, I feel like I know the answer to it, but I still want to talk a little bit about it, because you said you come from the lead gen world, and now given that you're running a lot of content focused ads that are probably not you're probably not asking them to fill a form to read those content and things like that. What was the mindset shift that needed to happen for you to sort of like be like fully bought into this concept of, okay, hey, we don't have to actually gate all these content pieces for us to actually give value and actually see conversions in the long run?
Yeah, so I think it's, a lot of it comes down to what KPIs you're held accountable. I think for all of us, so much of our behavior is determined by what goal we're trying to reach. And I think, in the past, I was held to basically a form fills target, right? Of like, I need 100 people to fill out this form. And I was like, done, I got you. And now that's really not what my target's been. It's been a kind of interest, a very rough SQL kind of thing of like, okay, are we handing off a qualified account? But it's hard to always know where the account came from, right? I think everybody is dealing with a large percent of inbound volume being direct, which is every marketer's favorite channel, right? And then another one is having a pipeline target. I got a pipeline target last quarter at Appcues, and we made a lot of these shifts prior to that, but I think when you have a pipeline target instead of like just a raw MQL target, it really changes your approach to things. If you're not just being held to form fills, like it really changes your approach. And I think it makes you more creative and think about things a little bit in a broader sense. And then I think also, Appcues is such a great example of content working well that it's hard to go in and not see the value of leading with content, to be completely honest. Like we see how much has come in from organic channels. And so once you see that, it's hard to not be like, well, shoot, I just need more people to see this content. Like then I'll be good. But I also do think it took me a little bit of time. Like I even remember when I first started, I'm trying to think I think we were talking about some new content asset, and we had some big argument internally about like whether or not we were going to gate it and like how much of it we were going to gate, because I was like, well, I kind of like need this to be gated. And everyone was like, well, no, we're not going to, like, right. It's just like this kind of back and forth headbutting of like, everyone has different goals and the way that they approach it is really different. And I think it just took me a while to realize that I couldn't directly connect the dots between someone filling in a form and them like actually being a good fit for the product. And that's when I was like, okay, well then maybe someone filling in the form doesn't really mean much if they're not necessarily going to be this good fit. And once you realize how, I guess, it totally depends on the product, but especially when you have a product with a longer buying cycle or a more complex buying committee, you start to realize that like it's going to be really hard to connect the dots between someone filling in the form and like the company actually buying. And so in that world, like you just have to diversify and trust that like if you're getting out there and people are able to really see your brand and see the value of it, that's what's going to drive signups, not like this one time you gated an ebook and sent them 10 emails. So I think that's the difference.
I recently downloaded an ebook from this completely unknown brand, and I've been getting emails from them for the last 2 months now. But
And you're
I
ready
still
to
have no idea. I still have no idea what they do, to be completely honest. So, yeah.
I mean, I
Cool.
think that there are times that you can gate things, but I think the key is to make gating have a point, right? Anytime you need someone to fill in something, there needs to be like a reason for them to fill it in, right? So like if I have to fill in a form for a trial, all the questions need to be relevant to my experience, what I get in. Like, don't ask me like how big my company is unless you're going to go and change my trial experience based on how big my company is. And the same thing for an ebook, like unless it's an asset that like really needs to be delivered via email, or it's going to make it easier for me to share or something like that, like there's probably not a reason to deliver it, like to ask for email in the first place. So I think just being like really intentional about like what you're asking for from someone and making sure they feel like there is value to giving it to them. So
Got it. Cool. We have a question from the audience. Let me quickly. Yeah. So, does performance marketing get to prioritize what type of content is produced by the content team, or do you typically just pick up the content pieces that work best and use them in the ads?
So it's both, actually, is what we've found. So it really started with me experimenting more on LinkedIn and wanting more content to try. And so one of the things we were trying is like document ads on LinkedIn, or like those little carousels, where you can kind of flip through things. And I was seeing a lot of influencers, especially, use them to kind of really basically distribute content and like distribute ways of doing things. And so I worked with our content and social person to be like, okay, well, what blog articles do we have that we could transform into this format? And to this day, those are some of our best performing ads, is the document ads that basically like rehash a really good blog article. But it was also one of those where it goes the other way too, where it's once we figured that out, we started thinking from a content perspective about how we could create content that would fit kind of like into that format. So one of the things we did there was we generated new customer stories and tried to kind of put them into that format because we knew it was going to work that way. Or we started trying to find more like, ROI driven content because that was performing really well in the content we were promoting. So I think it really has to go both ways. And the more that performance marketing and content can work really closely together and learn from each other, I think the better off you really are. I've found that we both look at different numbers and we both look at engagement in different ways. And so I become a better performance marketer when I understand like what the content team thinks looks good for them right now. And I think they become better when they understand, what kinds of language and stuff is performing well on ads. So I think it really all comes down to like the more you can share learnings together and the more you can look for ways to, I would say, like kill two birds with one stone with anything you do, the better off you'll be.
Got it. Awesome. So, Meg, I think we talked about the importance of brand, right? And uh, I was wondering, like, if you had any specific advice for, say, demand gen marketers who are trying to introduce brand into their marketing mix, more specifically, like especially it's usually the beginning stages that's probably the hardest, right? It's like, hey, we're not getting conversions, but you're asking me to do brand, you're asking me not to focus on performance marketing. What am I supposed to do now? Is usually the the thought process at that point. So any advice for marketers over there?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. And I think I have been very lucky, and that especially like my boss at Appcues is very, he totally sees the value in brand. So it wasn't a hard sell in some ways. So I didn't have to like really go in through the trenches and really convince people, which I consider myself very lucky for. I think one of the benefits I've had that I think I would encourage people to maybe start with is getting commitment for like an all-in budget that you get to decide what the mix of campaigns or investments you're making out of it is. And so instead of having to have every single investment be approved, ask for, give me my overall budget and give me a goal. And then my job is to hit that goal. And how I do it doesn't matter as long, I don't want to like tarnish the brand, but like, what things I invest in, maybe we'll still talk about, but it'll be less nitty gritty. And so I think that that's what's helped me too, is I've been able to experiment and try new things because I had more of an all in budget that yes, I was going to write out, yes, I was going to explain, and yes, I was going to talk through all my investments with my boss and try to, validate all of them. But at the end of the day, there was an expectation that like I was getting X dollars in order to like achieve some goal, right? And if I didn't achieve it, that was on me versus one-off questions to be like, well, can I run this now? Can I have another, $1,000 a month to do this? And so I think that can be a really good way to do it. And then you have to make the decision on your own, kind of like how you split things up. And if you mess up, it's on you. And so I think that that's one side of it. And then I think finding ways to start small can be valuable too. So if you have a content team, I think finding ways to partner with them can be really good, or kind of expand their reach a little bit. You can spend not that much money and just promote stuff the content team is already doing. So that can be huge and maybe a really easy way to kind of like show the value of brand. The hardest thing with brand is that it takes a lot longer to kind of measure. So you kind of have to look at it like over time. And then I think the last one is, if you're going to start doing anything brand related, figuring out where you can ask more self-attribution questions is valuable. Right. You have to remember that people don't actually remember where they saw you first, but it's helpful to get some of their answers because you might find things that you didn't think of. Right. And so it's good. I think we have, free single line fields on our trial and demo sign up asking, where did you hear about us? And then we also try to get the sales team to ask it when they can too. So we have a couple of different points of reference to better understand, like, maybe that's not like the first way they actually heard about us, but it's the one that stuck out, right? And so it's good to look at overall. I think for us, it really showed how much we got from referrals, which to me, referrals is both an indication of a great product and also a great brand experience. I think that the two go hand in hand, right? Because you need a great product for people to talk about it, but you also need enough for them to like remember it when the time is right.
Got it. I think we have a very similar approach over here at Revenue Hero as well, in terms of the self-attribution, right? Like, it's not the single source of truth for sure. Like, I don't remember what I had for breakfast today morning, so that's me. But and that's the approach that we're sort of taking over here as well, generally speaking. So, but if people say that, hey, I saw your LinkedIn ad, um, the the thought process is, okay, hey, maybe they saw somewhere else as well, but LinkedIn ads is the one that stood out for them, right? That had an impact in their minds, enough for them to remember and actually type it out. And if somebody types out a really specific ad or a creative that they really enjoyed, I'm not going to pause that ad for sure. So
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
exactly. And to me, like, one written out mention of something is probably worth like at least 100 people having been influenced from it, right? Like, it's like if you get one person to write it down. Although I will say it depends on persona. Like, I love when you ever get to market to marketers, right? Because marketers will be like, so I saw your one ad that has the variation of the light purple background. And you're like, yes, thank you. You understand me. We have the same struggles, all of that.
I got the exact message from one of our customers today. So so we were having a conversation about LinkedIn ads and how do you attribute it and all that stuff. And then I think he also came on our website. He started seeing our ads, and then after he requested a demo, he pinged us and said, "Hey, I saw your LinkedIn ads. Kudos to the person who's running your LinkedIn strategy. This is how I converted." And I'm like, yes, we are celebrating this.
Amazing. Yes, those are the people. Those are people that I want to give like huge discounts. Whenever I see that, I was like, can we just give these people the product for free? Like, they're doing God's work out there right now.
Got it. So it looks like we have one more question. Cool. What has been your approach? So in the age of proving ROI, what has been your approach to the risk of investing in things that are hard to track?
Yeah, I think this is getting harder and harder these days. I think I think one thing you have to do is set expectations early on that things like the more that you can set expectations internally that you can't have direct one-to-one lines to prove ROI anymore, like the better off you'll be. I think that that's just valuable for everybody in this day and age. We've been investing more with things that are hard to track. Reddit is a good example of that. LinkedIn is a good example of that. And I think that there is a level of going with your gut now that marketers like have to approach. And like if you are confident in something, other people will be to some extent too. And I'm not saying you just like, go be like, well, my gut told me it was a good idea. Like you can't just rely on that, but I think we have to take more risks as marketers. And then I think on top of that, you have to do more to see overall lift or drop as a result of things you do. You have to look at the overall lift or drop of like, inbound work that you're doing. And although it's hard, try not to change too many things at once so you can kind of better measure that. I've never had a fancy attribution system or anything like that to make it, easier for me to know what was actually working or not working. So I think a lot of what you have to do is this kind of, a combination of self-attribution with looking at overall lift on things. And when I look at the risk of investing in something new, I kind of have to look at what I think it's replacing. So as I said, for us, organic was such a huge channel. Organic search was huge for us. And we knew that our content was generating a ton of signups. And so I knew going into this that if I can get my content in front of people, I'm going to probably convert them. Like that has been working for us in the past in a way that was very proven. And so that to me decreases the overall risk, right? Like I know that this kind of content is going to work. And what my risk is here is really just trying it in a new channel. But I already have some confidence that this type of thing has worked. So I think the more that you can build on things that you are confident in worked to kind of decrease the overall risk you have, the better off you'll be. And, kind of changing one thing instead of like, I'm going to try Reddit and we're going to create a ton new content for it. And we're like, and everything's going to be different. Instead say, okay, we're going to try Reddit. And this is just a channel change. We're going to take content that we know worked and just try it on a new channel. I think that that's maybe one of the more valuable ways to go about it is to kind of control the things you can control and limit how many things you change at once.
I love that. I've been guilty of making too many changes at once, and it's especially when you're super excited about a specific tactic or a channel, and I'm like, yes, let's do all of that this week, and yeah, I don't want to talk about it after that. Got it. So I think we've talked about a lot of experiments, that you've done, right? Are there any quirky campaigns or ideas that you've wanted to execute, or you've executed them? And can you talk a little bit about some of those things as well?
Yes. So I am a self-described crazy idea person. Like I'm the one who's going to come in with the wildest idea and not understand where we can't do it. I've had to apologize to my teammates many times for that. So I almost have too many ideas. I really have to be reined in. If anybody's seen Wedding Crashers, there's this time when Vince Vaughn says, I'm an idea man. I thrive on enthusiasm. And that is me. Like I just come up with random ideas. And I really just need someone sometimes to be like, okay, Meg, that's great. Now let's focus on reality. But my team very sweetly supported me in one of my wild ideas this past February. We had decided we need to generate more customer stories. We hadn't created a case study, or I think we'd only created like 2 case studies in all of 2023. But we were getting more pressure to kind of have more customer examples. Both like the sales team wanted more from different industries and different company sizes. Influencers we were working with were like, I'd really like some customer examples to kind of use. So like we knew we needed more of that content. So I decided to send out a type form to like all of our customers being like, hey, I just want a small favor. Like, tell me something cool you're doing. And we got a ton of responses. And as a result, we kind of decided to rethink our customer stories hub. We like created a new kind of format for it, all of that. So that's kind of the background, right? So we have this new customer stories hub. We need to launch it. We're trying to figure out how. It just so happens it's January. February and Valentine's Day are coming up. And I decided it'd be a really great idea to send singing Valentines to all of our customers who did a customer story with us. Now, the small wrinkle in that was that I really wanted like a barbershop quartet vibe, and I wanted people to like show up at people's houses and somehow it get filmed. That's my like really quirky, wild idea that someday I will execute on, but we couldn't execute on in time. So instead, I convinced 10 Appcues employees to rap, sing, or recite ChatGPT written poetry about these customer stories and the customers, record a video of themselves doing it, and post it on LinkedIn. So we called it Appcues. And on Valentine's Day, we posted like 10 videos of like different Appcues employees, like basically like singing songs. Like it was like our own version of singing Valentine's, singing songs to different customers. And it was wild. Like customers saw it and were like, didn't expect it. Like you would randomly, like you weren't sure, right? Like when anyone was going to log into LinkedIn. So some people would like first thing in the morning would be like, oh my gosh, this made my day. And then even throughout the day, you'd still get people trickling in being like, oh my gosh, how did I only just see this? Like it was just such a fun campaign and so randomly wild and absurd. And I can only thank, my teammates at Appcues for putting up with the fact that I asked them to like recite poetry. One guy actually had a book out and he was like, and now I'm going to recite from my poem book. And then he started reading as if he was reading from this book. So it was amazing. And we saw some really great like characters of different people come out as a result about it. But I think that that's the wildest idea I've actually executed. So we'll see where I go next. I have a lot of wild ideas that I have not executed yet.
We should probably do. We should probably send a type form to you and ask you to list down all your wild ideas, and we should probably get everyone to vote on it, and everybody should collectively try to execute that. That'll be the wildest idea.
If I could just get paid to come up with like really wild ideas that are almost impossible to execute, like I would be very rich. Like that, I would be crushing it if that was all I needed.
Awesome. I think there was one campaign that you folks recently ran. I should probably first, after the session, I'll go check out the Valentine's campaign. But if I remember correctly, very recently, folks listed all the companies that are customers of Appcues alphabetically, all the way from A to Z. And
Yes.
that was like super wild when I saw it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out what to do for customer appreciation. And actually, that was like our plan B idea. Actually, so like Meg's original wild idea was I wanted to do fake G2 reviews for like a whole bunch of our customers and have it be things like, like great team to work with, but I really hate how much red they use in all their in-app experiences. Like joking, like 4 stars, like, like doesn't come to my monthly meeting, like something like that. That's what I really wanted to do. And we didn't have time to pull it off. But then we started thinking about it and we were like, hey, well, what other fun things could we do? And we were thinking about Dr. Seuss's ABCs because a bunch of us have kids. And so we were like, big A, little a, like what begins with A? And then I was like, oh, maybe we could find like one for every letter. And I remember I was on this call with KK who leads social at Appcues. And I was like, but I mean, like, do you think we actually have a customer for every letter of the alphabet? Like, that seems wild. Like, we can't actually have a customer for like every letter of the alphabet. And so I was like, I'm going to go check in Salesforce. And I go, wait a second, like we actually have more than one customer for every letter of the alphabet. We might have to like pick the good ones. And so we went through and we only found customers that had like 4 stars or more on G2 and all these things. And we're able to find one for every single letter of the alphabet. It was awesome.
Amazing. So I think I want to talk a little bit. I think we're close to time. So there's this one question that I've always wanted to ask. If I remember correctly, very recently, the marketing and the sales team together started reporting into one org at Appcues. Any learnings that you can share from having both the teams reporting into the same org? How did, say, marketing's day-to-day activities, probably not the day-to-day activities, but probably the processes, the thought processes, any impact on that? How did that change?
Yeah. So when our VP of sales left earlier this spring, and after that happened, my boss, the VP of marketing, took over both sales and marketing at Appcues. And it was really exciting to feel like for the first time we were all like really on the same page, right? I think there's always been a really strong relationship between sales and marketing at Appcues, and it was honestly one of the reasons that I went there in the first place, because I didn't want that like really acrimonious like headbutting situation. But once you all report up to one person, you just lose kind of all sense of like credit, everybody trying to take credit for things. Like you really all have to work together because there's no even disagreement at the executive level of like who's doing a better job. It's just purely like, are we hitting revenue targets or are we not? And so that's when, one of my goals shifted to being a pipeline goal. And then in my role, I got embedded a lot more with the sales team than maybe some other members of the marketing team did, right? Like some of content didn't necessarily like see them more and stuff like that. But I started working much more closely with them. And I think from a marketing perspective, it helped me start to understand the sales side of things a lot more. I think I learned how to write email from a sales perspective. Before, I remember the first time someone asked me to write an email, I sent it to like our top AE and she was like, "This is great." And then she like redlines like 70% of it. "This is great. These 2 sentences at the top. Let's just not write any of the rest of it." So I think it's taught me a lot about writing and how like, how sales communicates versus how marketing communicates. But I think it's also made all of us a lot more focused on the revenue generated from an individual activity instead of the leads generated. In the past, we were much more focused on, okay, like what accounts are we warming for sales and then like getting them to raise their hand and passing over. And now it's like, it doesn't really matter how many accounts sales gets. It really matters like what that revenue or pipeline total is. And so I have invested more, in larger accounts than I was previously, and being a lot more deliberate with like which accounts I'm going after, from how much pipeline I think they'll generate or how quickly they'll close. We've done a lot more nurture work too for accounts currently in sequence. I know I talked about earlier in the session how we're like boosting thought leader ads for our AEs to accounts they have in sequence, to stuff like that. And we've started nurturing a lot more of like existing accounts in our CRM. And so looking for ways that we can do more kind of account revival rather than just bringing in net new. So I think it's done a lot of things. It's made me kind of like dive more into like how sales approaches and understand things from their perspective. But it's also made me focus more on what accounts we actually have and how we can close the ones that already exist, rather than kind of that marketing mindset, which I feel like sometimes can be more like, how do I go find more people? And instead now it's like, how do I like get the ones that I have to convert in some way?
Makes sense. Have you seen this sort of impact, how quickly some of these deals close, and any impact on, say, the branding side of things?
Yeah, so it's kind of tough because this move coincided with, I think, like the biggest increase in sales cycles that there's been in a while. Like starting this spring is when sales cycles started like really lengthening. So we haven't really seen an improvement, but I don't know that that's shocking because I don't think anybody is seeing an improvement in sales cycle lengths right now. In terms of the brand side of things, I think it's maybe made me think a little bit about like how we do more brand marketing to like an entire organization. And then we also more recently hired an AE who's much more active on LinkedIn, and like she does ghostwriting and does her own sponsored posts on the side. And so working with her too has made me kind of think through, okay, the brand that she has is even bringing people in. So how do we create more of that for our existing reps, and how do we kind of like create a brand behind them to kind of encourage both net new people as well as nurture folks that they're already talking to in one way or another.
Very interesting. Amazing. Sweet. If there are any last minute questions, I think folks drop it in the Q&A. I think we have a couple of more minutes left. If not, this has been amazing.
This has been great. Yes, super fun. And a couple good questions too.
Sweet. Chara just dropped one of our wildest ideas that we recently did. So there's that MarTech map that gets published every year. right? So we basically just printed that all those 14,000 logos, and we went to this recent event, and we gave folks coming in a magnifying glass and asked them to find their company's logo in that map, and talked about like how difficult it is for prospects. If prospects are finding you after all that effort, right? And why do you have to make them wait after all that? So that was one cool idea that we recently implemented.
That's fun. Yeah, I think anything that kind of like breaks through the noise and is a little bit different, people get excited about. I also love stuff where you can pull in, like ideas that B2C has had. Like I love if I see a B2C campaign that I really like, I'm always like, okay, how can we do this in a B2B context, right? Because like that's I feel like where a lot of the really fun innovation is on the B2C side. So if you can pull some of that in, it's can be really exciting.
All right, cool. All right, Meg, I think we are at time. This has been fun. I had loads of fun chatting. I learned a ton as well. I used to do a lot of marketing on the PLG side of things. It's been a while. It was great to sort of talk through some of those things today. And I am looking forward to experimenting a little bit on Reddit, hopefully sometime in the future, but probably not make too many changes and break things as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
All right, folks, everybody who tuned in today, thanks a lot for tuning in. We have another session on coming Tuesday. We have Kjernberg joining in, and we're going to talk a lot about some of the mistakes you shouldn't do while you're trying to scale your demand gen efforts. So I hope to see you all over there in that session as well. So thanks a lot for joining in, folks. Have a good one. Meg, we'll see you in the backstage.
Sounds good.